we are. Whom do we have? Okay, we're going to add. Are people more or less alphabetized? Okay, I think so. All right, I think I have our people here. Oh, except Kelly, I didn't bring in the teacher. That would be important. Okay, hang on.
Just a tad.
We should bring in our preceptor too. We're all sitting here like, come on, Kelly, seriously, are you going to start class or what? Okay, I should also probably give him permission to start his video. Okay.
Hello.
There we go. Hey, Kelly.
Hello. Let me close out Twitch so I don't get echoes. Okay. How are you all doing?
Very good.
Oh, looking forward to this one.
Oh, good. Good. Is it possible to enable screen sharing or not?
So, that may be. I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure I'm doing that properly. Yeah. Hang on.
If you click share screen, is there an option in that to enable participants to share their screen? Or if you click on my name, are you able to prompt me to share my screen?
Let's see. I think it's not giving me the participant option here.
And as I'm sure you're listening, Sharon, I've got this giant timer on my desk set for 20 minutes to make sure that I stop in time so that Corey can go to his Ask Me Anything.
That is
but okay, well,
impressive.
while you figure out if we can do this or not, I'm just going to start talking because a large portion of this was going to be the way my class is going to be designed is we are going to have a series of videos that we're going to watch, and we're going to be doing discussion about them. Seeing as how I didn't feel really good emailing all of you and saying, hey, can you watch these videos before, this webathon on Saturday, I thought we would just kind of do a generic discussion of anime. I was going to start with talking about why anime, why should we watch it, why should we study it, provide a very brief history, and then just kind of open up to see what your experiences are with anime. If you are a regular viewer, if you love it, if you hate it, how familiar you are with it, and then just what your thoughts are on why or why not someone should watch anime. So if we can't get the screen sharing to work, then we'll just skip that first part and jump right into the discussion aspect of this little part of the webinar. So what are you thinking, Corey?
Okay, so well, first of all, I'm thinking I'm not finding the
That's
place
fine.
to give. I think maybe it's one of those special Zoom settings that have to be done globally.
Yes,
beforehand.
unfortunately, there are lots of special Zoom settings that we've found.
Yes. As part of our ongoing Zoom transitional experiment. But anyway, so but I can answer the anime question. I am new to anime. I've not really watched any anime until quite recently because my my two sons are very interested in anime. My older son, extremely so. My younger son is sort of the apprentice anime viewer in our house. But he is also the one who has been getting his parents to watch it. So we are watching one of his favorite animes now, and he just started me watching a second one last night. So I have not seen much, but I have seen the first half of the Death Note series, and I have seen the first episode of Demon Slayers last night. So
Okay.
yeah, that is my
Good
experience
starts.
so far.
Good starts.
Oh, and I have seen Spirited Away by Miyazaki. I've seen the feature film there too.
That's great. Yeah, and my class this fall or this December will feature Miyazaki's a subset of his feature films instead of telling you guys to watch 7 seasons of some anime. How about the rest of you? Are you guys regular viewers? How familiar are you with anime? Yes, Sarah.
I know absolutely nothing about anime. I'm a complete anime noob, but my daughter is very into digital art. She does a lot of it, and she does watch anime, so she talks about it, and that's about as much as I know. So I'm interested from if there is such a thing as below beginner, that's me.
Okay. Laurel or Lynn or Carrie? Yeah, Laurel.
I've been watching anime for the entirety of my lifetime. I started with Hamtaro and Kiki's Delivery Service as a very small child. I really got into it in high school. I've watched a couple hundred, and I love manga. I read a lot more manga than I watch anime, although many of the manga I love also have anime adaptations. My most recent favorite is an ongoing series called Spy Family. Viz Media is doing the English translation. It's only 6 volumes out, but it's a hilarious comedy about a psychic, an assassin, and a spy that all pretend to be nuclear family, and they don't know that the other people aren't normal. Set in like a Cold War, slightly Japanified setting. It's quite fun.
Okay. How about you, Lynn?
Like Corey and Sarah, my entry is through my son and wanting to try to understand what it is that he likes about anime. I'm a newbie also.
Okay. And Carrie, how about you?
Well, we got introduced through the Americanified editions of anime, and they were too Disney for us. And so my middle child and I have just been binging everything that's been dubbed that we can find through this pandemic. And it has been just absolutely amazing. The storytelling, the topics, the things that are discussed, the way it's presented. It is a completely new and amazing way of communicating emotions on screen that is just really powerful. It's way too much for my husband, but we really find some great joy, and we've had some inside jokes that are just really fun. So we've just been really binging probably about 15 animes that we've been able to complete that are completely dubbed. And then we get to a point where, oh, look, they quit dubbing in the middle of season 3, and it's just really frustrating.
Okay. Yep. I've been there plenty of times before. Now let's start with a fun game here. If you were to describe anime in 5 words or less, how would you do it? Now we have anywhere from complete newbie to Laurel. I just want to get your opinions on when I say the word anime, what pops up in your mind? Laurel, do you want to begin? I'll put you on the spot, seeing how you are. Actually, no. Let's save you for last, Laurel. Okay. Corey, we'll start with you.
Eyeballs.
Okay. Eyeballs.
I had this
Excellent.
fun moment watching episode 1 of Demon Slayer last night, where like the little girl is looking at her with these huge eyes, and then he says something and her eyes got bigger, and I'm like, that could happen? Holy cow. So like it's I love the expressions and the reflections in eyes. I'm just like riveted by the eyes of the anime characters.
Wonderful. How about you, Lynn?
I was going to say the same thing. Big eyes.
Big eyes. Okay. Carrie?
I would say this is a teen girl drama packaged for a boy.
Okay, I think we're 1 or 2 words over, but I will accept it because that was wonderful. Sarah, how about you? Oh, you're muted. Muted.
Wait, you're muted, Sarah.
You'd think I'd know by now, being relatively techie. So the only things I can think of right now, apart from the huge, almost round eyes, is also the mouth. Think of the way that the mouth seems to move as well, which is, it seems to just almost become rounded and just open, close, rather than have, kind of more human ways of moving the lips, sort of thing. So that's how I have seen what little I have seen. And it really reminds me of old cartoons that I used to watch back in the 80s, in the days when I was young, talking about things like G-Force and Thundercats and all that kind of thing, where they had similar sorts of things, like almost stop-go animation. And the big mouth thing and the big eye thing. That's it. And I know that's more than 3 words, but there you are.
That's okay. And let's end with you. We already have. Laura, let's end with you then.
You've been a lot more literal, I think, than everyone else. Because what I would say is just multi-genre Japanese animation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to try to do this in a visual or non-visual way because I have a whole bunch of lovely pictures to share with you guys, but that is fine. And yes, you guys, all of you hit on all the points I want to talk about. Number one, when people think anime, they tend to think exaggerated expressions, like just way over the top eyeballs and facial expressions and movements and just like arms that are moving in ways that are not humanly possible. Also, compared to American cartoons or animation, they tend to have a relatively complex plot, tend to be at least possibly more adult focused, or let's just say they're not limited to just children. And Japanese anime also tends to feature a lot more of a space or time dilation, not kind of fixed on a normal physically limited space and time concept that exists in reality. And then finally, I would like to say that it tends to oscillate. It moves between a complete immersion experience as well as something that will just kind of throw you out as a viewer. Now, everything that I just said above, though, is what people tend to traditionally think of as anime, but in reality, what Laurel said is what I want to end with, in that over the past couple decades, this got a little bit complex to be able to say and define, because anime is it's varied. It isn't a genre, it is a medium, and there is all sorts of different anime shows taking place with all sorts of different styles. But basically it comes down to it is animation made in Japan. And 15 minutes, a little bit less, let's go briefly into the history, very briefly, and why this is the case. Why are these Japanese animations, why do they tend to have this over-exaggeration, this just kind of emphasis on these emotions and this excessive movement that is a little bit more stopgap than a smooth animation such as Cinderella, which was made and designed to mimic real-life movement. And basically, it comes down to the time period in which anime became really popular. And that was in the 1950s through the 1970s. During this time period, once again, you can't see my beautiful quote here, but I will read this lovely quote that I have from Hayao Miyazaki. And he claims that no other country has undergone such a traumatic modernization. Japan very quickly went from a pre-industrialized to post-industrialized country, entering the global age in a remarkably short time period. And with this, they went from a, whether or not you want to call it peaceful, but peaceful rural existence to full-fledged modern global society in a very short time period. And lots of people were looking to cope with this stress. And so the manga volumes became very popular for both children and adults. It's very common to see Japanese men in business suits going to a manga cafe, picking up something and just reading it on a break to deal with the copings of stress. At the same time period, anime started to pick up in popularity. Unfortunately, computers weren't very prevalent in the 1950s or 60s. And so they needed a way to be able to make animation much quicker. And so a lot of the things that we kind of associate with anime were not an artistic choice at the time period. It was, frankly, a cost-saving measure. They wanted to make 20 to 30-minute episodes as cheaply and cost-effectively as possible. And so that involved a reduction of realistic movement. They were no longer basing things on live actors and the movements. They were just kind of trying to instill the movement of someone in as easy way as possible without realistically mimicking movement. And that's why we ended up with this kind of excessive, over-the-top expressions and such that we have today. So now let's get on to actually the heart of what I care about here and why anime. Laurel, I'd be interested in your opinion of this, but I'd also want to hear from the rest of you. Where do you think anime stands in, let's say, literary analysis? What value do you think it has as a medium, if any? What can anime do that other mediums cannot do? Any initial reactions? Yes, Laurel.
So what I really enjoy about anime is how well it conveys emotional response visually. And part of the exaggerated technique that was mentioned with the large eyes even is something that you can't have obviously with a real life actor, or even in a lot of the more realistic animation that you see a lot in the Western fields. That kind of exaggerated emotion really conveys both character state and how the world reacts around it. Gives you so much more information as a viewer. So it allows for easy interpretation to an extent, but also a lot more deeper emotional. For example, you can have an anime, 12 episodes, and you can be laughing one episode and crying the next, and there's not as much of a disconnect for me with animation as there would be with that kind of tonal shift in a lot of other mediums. So I find it impressive how it goes with emotions and also incorporating different aspects of either mythology is one of my favorites, with things like Mushishi, or even historical with Rurouni Kenshin, which is historical romance and also hilariously overdone at times villains, along with tragedy, and it's all together and none of it seems to disconnect from the rest. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, that's my thoughts exactly. I love the fact that in anime you can, because of this just kind of historical accident, and just carry on a little bit of the Japanese art form before that, well, not quite a bit, but because of this historical accident, trying to make things as cheaply as possible, there has come about this medium where it is perfectly normal and acceptable and expected that things are not depicted as they are in reality. And so if we, turn to Tolkien's, well, not Tolkien's, but in On Fairy Stories, he talks about the inconsistency of reality. The thing is, these exaggerated facial expressions or movements are expected. It is internally consistent to anime. And so I love the fact that because that is expected, you aren't thrown out of the anime when something crazy like that happens. You can stay in it. And because of that, you are able to experience and tell and learn about stories that just are not possible in other visual mediums. And because of its emphasis on the emotional characteristic, it's also something that's a little bit harder to experience in a text. Corey, did you want to say something to that? Seemed like you were.
There are a couple things that I think are really interesting there. One of the things that I think is really, and I was shockingly, I was thinking of On Fairy Stories too, but what I was thinking of in particular was Tolkien talking about children and children's literature, right? And, to some extent, of course, we still deal with the fantasy is for children thing, but that's been changing. I think in the post-Tolkien world, that's been changing. And it's for a while now, it's been more okay for grown-ups to be into fantasy and not be ashamed of that. But I would say cartoons are actually another frontier there, right? Where again, watching an animated thing was something that you're supposed to leave behind when, it's fine for kids to watch cartoons, right? But an adult who watches cartoons is either some kind of connoisseur, right? Like a hobbyist of some sort, right? Or just kind of weird. And anime, I think, has created a real, but why should that be? Why should it be that animated TV or film should be it doesn't make any more sense than the fairy tales are for children thing that Tolkien was working against, right? And in a lot of ways, animated stories, and just as manga and graphic novels and things, that kind of marriage of visual art with storytelling, it's a wonderful medium. It's obviously a wonderful medium. There's clearly no reason why that should be restricted merely to childly consumption, right? So one of the things that I sort of have felt about anime is that there has been, I have sensed anyway, and I don't think it's just the growing interest in my own house, but I have sensed this it's still a little bit weird for many cartoons, for adults to watch many cartoons. But if it's Japanese, it's okay. It's in a different category if it's a Japanese cartoon. And I think that's a really good thing. It is really interesting. As I say, I've watched a total of maybe 18 episodes of anime right now, and one feature film. So I'm still very, very much a newbie. But it's fascinating. And Laurel, I've been really interested to see just what you were talking, that kind of internal emotional vocabulary of anime, right? The things that are not imitating life. Kelly, I was just watching the episode of Death Note we were watching with my son last night. Featured this one like where the girl comes across the street to greet him excitedly, except she like launches herself horizontally and tackles him in the street, which would have resulted in like emergency room visits for the both of them had it happened in real life, right? But it was great. Like and Kelly, just as you said, I didn't feel like that. I kind of laughed a little bit because it was, I think, deliberately overdone it because it was supposed to show that her reaction is over the top, right? He's uncomfortable with her reaction, but still, like it didn't break the frame. Like it didn't break the secondary reality because I'm like beginning to get the vocabulary, right? It's not about realistic motions. It's not about realistic facial expressions. It's communicating, and it's really interesting. Like both as a storytelling art form and as a visual art form, it's really fascinating, and I've been really enjoying that.
Now, I half-heartedly want to begin today's talk by saying I propose to speak about anime, though I am aware that this is a rash adventure, but I thought I'd save that for the future because I am planning on proposing a space module on Tolkien's On Fairy Stories and Miyazaki's view, because if you read some of his publications, they share a very similar mindset on the core values, especially on recovery and this inconsistency of reality. And so I expect that at some point in the future, maybe January or February. But as my timer is about to go off, let's quickly talk about what is coming up in December. There's the timer.
Speaking of the timer going off. So it's got that big analog thing and it beeps?
Giant,
that's an awesome
big analog thing. Yes, it is an awesome timer. We need to send you one of these. You hear that, Sharon? And so, yeah.
I'm fine.
So I love tons of anime and manga, and you can expect a lot of space modules from me. But at the moment, I'm focusing on Miyazaki and his work because I feel there's the most crossover there. And so right now, the first module that you can sign up for right away in December is, I'm just calling Miyazaki's Anime 1, which is focusing on, what did I call it? I called it Recovery of Innocence, because you'll find that childhood is a very common theme throughout all of Miyazaki's work, in particularly this just over-idealized state of childhood, and where he views childhood as kind of this utopian site of innocence and wonder. And it is my opinion that he uses his films to instill recovery in us, to regain that lost innocence. And so we will be talking about 4 of Miyazaki's works. We will be talking about My Neighbor Totoro, we will be talking about Ponyo, and we will be talking about Spirited Away, and we will be talking about one final one that I have not yet decided on. I'm torn, but I figure 4 major works is probably all we will be able to cover in number. So I really hope that I'll see you guys there, and we can talk more about anime. I'm torn. There are several ways I could go. I am a little bit tempted to pull in a little bit of his work on Heidi, Girl of the Alps, because that was my thesis. But we'll see if I actually do that or not.
As long as it's not Grave of the Fireflies.
Grave of the that was Takahata. And so this, of course, focuses on Miyazaki, but I like Grave of the Fireflies. So we may do that in the future.
I feel like that needs its own. That's hard to include with other things.
Yeah,
yes,
it is. But any final questions in the 2 minutes we have before Corey needs to sign on to Reddit and start doing his AMA?
Yeah, I do. So let's see. On YouTube, Over says Princess Mononoke sounds like a must.
Once again, it will be. I will be covering all of Miyazaki's works and then some. But for this course, I really wanted to narrow it down on 4 things. And because my thesis was related to this topic of childhood, I figured that was kind of the least amount of prep work that I could just hit the ground running with. And so I'm more focusing on this childhood and innocence aspect. But Princess Mononoke will be covered. I'm thinking in a Japanese setting themed course for that, including Totoro as well and a couple of others works.
Yeah, and we may have an array of anime related options for modules after December. Where Kelly's first Miyazaki module in December is our first little taster of the anime stuff, but I know this is a rich field for study for which many people are very enthusiastic. So I'm sure there will be an increase of options there. We also have, of course, our Japanese children's literature class. We've got some
which I will be signing up for.
Perspective on that, yeah, from Pilar, who's going to be teaching later on. So we will have Japanese stuff in a couple different genres for this available this December. All right, thank you guys. We are like now officially back on schedule, like it's no thing. So thank you guys for your patience and efficiency. I appreciate it. And I do need to switch over to doing my AMA now. So I'm going to close out the breakout room. Thank you, Kelly. I am so excited to have your modules open, and you are very likely to find another Olsen or two, perhaps, in your modules moving forward.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, that'll be cool. All right, awesome. Thank you, guys.